Today's guest is a leader whose work has helped shape the future of national security and human performance. Retired Colonel Robert Epstein is a solutions architect at Leidos, where he helps guide the development of advanced command and control technology, the system that allow our military forces to gather information and make fast decisions and coordinate across land, air, and sea, space, and cyber domains. He's also played a major role in designing next-generation training environments for the Air Force and Space Force. Before joining Leidos, Robert served 26 years in the United States Air Force, retiring as colonel. His career included global intelligence and reconnaissance missions, combat missions and operations, and leadership roles around the world, including serving as commander of the Air Force Agency for Modeling and Simulation, where he helped modernize how warfighters train, prepare, and make decisions. He's also a devoted husband, father, and community leader whose commitment to serve extends far beyond the uniform. I'm honored to welcome Robert Epstein to the Peakality Podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so I want to just jump right on in and talk about, now that you are in retirement, what do you feel as though is the most profound understanding of leadership transitioning from being in uniform into being a civilian, a veteran?
I don't think it changes. The way you execute your missions from where it was in the military or where it was combat operations or leading large-scale type of exercises into going after captures and trying to win business and solve the government's problems. The concept of leadership is really about knowing your people, empowering them, and figuring out how to really get the most out of your folks to accomplish whatever the task is. So I don't see it really changing. It's modifying it to whatever the task at hand is, right? So it hasn't been a difficult transition.
No, that's amazing. So you just look at it as a different mission.
It's a different mission.
Yeah.
Different task, but understand what you're trying to accomplish. And then how do you play to your people's strengths, downplay their weaknesses, and achieve success, which was the same in the military.
So what is that breakdown? Like, how do you look at, if you are looking at an individual and what their strengths or weaknesses are, and you need them to accomplish a specific goal, what is your approach with that person?
So
that's the pain.
So it's an interesting question, but it really comes down to, you got to get to know your people, right? Everybody's different. What motivates them is different. What their capabilities are different. Understanding their capabilities, what they're skilled at, where they struggle, is key to sort of putting together your plan to go, here's what I need you to do, right? Putting them in the right place so it enables their success. The other thing, it's kind of interesting, you can't really approach it from I'm going to do the exact same thing every time. Sometimes you're a drill sergeant, you got to get sort of on people. Sometimes you're a coach, and showing them how to do it. And other times you're just a cheerleader, trying to push them along and make sure that they're doing great. So reading the room and reading what your leadership style needs to be for that group of people at that time, is it a new team? Is it a low performing team? Is it a high performing team? Really is important. But again, it all gets back to, you kind of have to know your people and what motivates them and their skill sets so that you can actually appropriately lead them properly.
So, you led the Air Force Simulation Training Facility.
Yeah, the airport gurus for modeling and simulation.
And how is it that you found training and being prepared and having an overall arching training kind of system versus getting to know the people and the person and how you can accommodate? Like, what does that transition look like?
So when you get to know your people, that's when you're leading a direct team. What I was responsible for as the commander of AFMs was creating realistic and relevant environments to allow training to occur. And I go back to my days as a young aviator where if the simulator was not representing reality or there was enough deviation from what I thought reality was, okay, you're wasting my time. I want to go fly. I'd rather do anything but what you've got me doing because it's not well due for real. How you create those realistic environments that people get the repetition, the ability to learn their mission, get their reps and sets, right? To go out there and practice so that when they get into combat for real, right, they're prepared. There was a great aviator, Moody Suter, from the 1960s, who was flying in Vietnam. And what they realized is we were having a lot of people that died early in their deployments into Vietnam. They started doing the analysis, and what they realized was the aviators that were getting shot down usually were in their first 10 missions. So they didn't have experience yet. So when they came back, they said, how do you get 10 bloodless battles? How do we create that opportunity so that we give you experience without killing you, right? Because most of the time experience is you survived, right, our entire lives. So they decided to create this thing called Red Flag, which is a large war game that we do out in the deserts of Nevada, where we could go out there and simulate what we thought combat was going to be. And we still do that today. It's an evolutionary process. The other thing I realized is you can't fight against yourself. So how do you get opportunities to practice against dissimilar platforms so that it's not you against what you think in the mirror is going to do? Because that's not realistic to what your adversary is, right? Their capabilities are. So it was creating the ability to reflect really what you were going to see in combat and give you that experience. That's how you train people, is to give them the ability to learn and make mistakes so that they develop that resiliency, and when they get there for the first time on their own, they're prepared, or at least they're significantly more prepared than had they never tested or seen this before.
Do you feel as though that you can kind of tell if a person or an individual is going to step into that role, or do you feel as though that can also be a coaching opportunity?
So it's a little bit of both. I'll give you an experience I had when I was an instructor at flight school. If you gave an opportunity to a student and they made the wrong decision, I can help correct that and teach them how to make the right decision. Where I always sort of bristled, and that was when I started thinking about washing people out, was if they froze up and they were unable to make a decision, that worries me. You know, you can't just vapor lock and go, I don't know what I'm going to do. It was much more of a, they went left, I really need you to go right. Okay, let's talk about that. We can train that, we can teach it. So some of it's inherent in the, grace under pressure. Can you actually process information quickly and remain calm and react? And then the other part is then we can teach you through experience, right, to make the right decisions. It's not for everybody. It's not. And so that's one of those where the reason we had a law in flight school, the reason we put them through the experiences was always to, okay, can we wash out the people that are not sort of capable of doing these tasks? And then for the people that are, can we help them learn to make the correct decisions as they go forward?
What do you feel as though has been the most interesting or fascinating thing that was, or the most surprising aspect, and once you started getting into more of a leadership role and training individuals, what do you feel as though that surprised you the most?
Surprises, like, I'm not sure I was surprised. I had a moment. I'll go back in time. 2002, I think it was January or February of 2002. I was the senior officer leading a mission flying over Afghanistan. And while we were doing the mission, I was bored, which surprised me. But it went back to because I had gone out to Red Flag about a year earlier, and I was so stressed, and I was being put in such complicated scenarios, right, and tasked and being put under pressure, that real combat, at least at that moment, seems mundane because I hadn't done this all before. It wasn't as complex. It wasn't as busy, and I knew what to expect. And that's where it kind of processed with me is you have to create those things for your people. They don't understand that when they're young, right? And there's a reason we do things the way we do. You train people early on to be tactical aviators, right? Fly your airplane. And as they evolve, it's now I want you to fly multiple airplanes or command multiple airplanes. Now I want you to lead larger organizations. And every time I went in there, they seemed like daunting tasks when I first got presented with them and seemed very, doable and acceptable as I migrated through my career. So you have to go back and say, when you're senior, how you create those young leaders, even those experiences, so that they grow to be able to handle larger, more complex situations. So was it surprising? No, but there was that. I still remember that day where I was put in charge, and then I looked back and went, oh, they got me ready for this. I didn't appreciate what they were doing at the time. I understood it when I was presented in that scenario.
Yeah, that's it's comforting to know that when you're in those situations that you could be bored because you've been trained so well, that it's not something you like, it's new.
So I always say, one of my favorite sayings was, people will always revert back to their lowest level of training.
Oh, okay.
So when you get into heavy stress situations, you don't have time to sort of ponder and think about what you're going to do. You're reacting. The reactions are all based on your training, right? It's rote memorization and things teaching you how to spell. So when someone puts you on the spot and asks you how to spell a word, you just blurt it out. Why? Because someone taught you that already, right? You can't stop and sort of like, well, that's the problem that we have to make sure that we eliminate.
Yeah. It's interesting to think about, like, you go to the lowest level of when you are trained, and that's your immediate response in a particular situation.
It's the muscle memory. It's the, I don't want to say it's rote memorization, because that's not appropriate. But if you go through, put people in enough situations or enough scenarios, and you kind of work through those scenarios, something new is presented, but they had seen something different before, right? Change is constant. So you present them with multiple variations, and eventually when they see something new, they're like, okay, and they respond the exact same way. They just tackle it and move on.
What is it that you feel as though the gaps are in training?
Ooh, that's an interesting, different question. The gaps we have today is we tend to do things the same way we've always done them. But the scenarios and the complexity of a modern battlefield, right, has evolved to the point where a single human will have difficulty comprehending and processing all the information that is now available. So really, it's how do you become human-machine partnering and teaming to take advantage of these new capabilities, that something is able to process all this information and feed it in a more digestible way to the human, so the human can actually work with it.
Okay, so not only with, do you feel as though that everyone's talking about AI, and do you feel, is AI playing a role in what you guys are doing now as well?
Absolutely. That's heavy in the business I'm in over at Leidos, because the way we look at things is, no one cares if you use an electric screwdriver when you're building a house. They just want you to build a good house. So why not use tools that's going to allow you to go faster and make it go and deal with higher volume? Artificial intelligence today is, how can I control multiple aircraft? How can I take all of this information and let the computer do what it does very well, process large bulks amount of information, and then feed it back to me for a decision-making sort of scenario? So introducing it there, whether it's in training or whether it's in actually decision advantage sort of capabilities that we do, it is a magnificent tool that's going to revolutionize the business.
Amazing. And what is it that you feel as though it may miss, though? Is it, it, like, for example, critical thinking and be able to respond or react quickly? Do you feel as though that's where the human and the machine are going to start to work together more? Or do you feel as though that's going to still be more relying on the pilot and those that are, on the ground, so to speak?
Yeah, so I always look at it this way. The key to artificial intelligence right now is trust. I don't trust things coming off of most of the large language models today, based on the fact they were all trained on the internet. And I'm going to be generous and say that a third of the stuff on the internet is wrong. So why would I expect an answer coming from a large language model to be correct? And if you're using the internet and large language models to train your AI, you're creating an inherent flaw. So where we go into is, how do I take authoritative data that I've already approved, and I train my models on it, but then I use that as decision aids to feed information back. But the human is now on the loop, not in the loop. And the human's allowed to take that information, and we, based on trust, can decide how much we're willing to accept. The great example was things like when people go driving, they use, a GPS or a Waze to help them navigate. If Waze tells you to take an exit, you have no feedback in the system whatsoever, you're going to go, that's ridiculous, I'm just going to continue straight. But when you see the red line telling you there's traffic in front of you, you start going, oh, okay, it's rerouting me, that makes sense. Now you have a higher degree of trust. And that's a human-machine teaming opportunity where you're going, okay, a machine's telling me to do something different to sort of help me achieve my goal. Same thing has to be developed as we go on. But I see that as being a game-changing technology.
Yeah, that's a great analogy. I really like that. You're like being able to visualize that. So we've talked a lot about like training and specifically within the military. But I see so many parallels with civilian world. And as you've transitioned from the military into the civilian world, what did you feel as though, you said it was not so difficult, but what was the most challenging aspect of that transition? Was it deciding what you wanted to do? Was it about acclimating to the hierarchy within an organization? What did you find was the most challenging aspect?
I think where a lot of military people struggle when they do the transition is you're coming from an environment where the mantra is service before self. It's team oriented. Everything is about the collective success. And when you go to industry, it's more individual based. Not making a judgment call on it, right? It's not really the purpose of the statement as much as because it is individual based, sort of where to anchor yourself becomes more of a challenge. And I think a lot of my contemporaries have struggled with that. Where I found it entertaining anyways is, finding the culture in a company that I felt actually was one that resonated with me. So when I found Leidos, I liked the collaborative nature. I liked the role that I got to go into. So I'm a solution architect. I work directly for our CTO under our Office of Technology, which is, to me, fantastic because I get to do all the innovative technologies and solve people's problems. So it's one of the things that I think people have to do is you have to be true to thine own self. Right? You have to look in the mirror. You have to know who you are. And when you're looking for those opportunities, transitioning from one thing to the next is, am I going to succeed in that role? Is that really who I want to be? Is that the role that I feel I can be successful? Is that something I want to do? And so when I talk to my friends that are getting out, right, you sit there and say, are you a business development guy? Are you program management? Are you a technologist? Because if you put somebody, no matter how competent they are, in the wrong role, the likelihood of success goes down significantly, or their level of satisfaction will go down.
Yeah, totally makes sense. I mean, and I guess it was there, quote unquote, training in that transition in that role? Yeah,
so the military actually has a thing called the Transition Assistance Program, TAP, that they require all of us to go through. And a number of people will do it multiple times. So a few years before retirement or before getting out, and you can actually date again. Everything from finances to how do you do a resume or how do you buy clothing, to go to a resume. I've learned how to wear color because I didn't for 26 years, right? I had green or blue, and that was really dictated between was I flying or going to a staff meeting. So I always kind of knew what to do. When you transition over to the civilian side, right, I have to go, who am I meeting with today? What do I need to wear? Which is a whole different concept or, things I had to put in my brain and learn. It seems daunting at first, but those are the things where there are so many organizations out there that are willing and do train military members to sort of how to get over into the civilian side, because it's somewhat foreign if you've done this a long time.
Yeah, I feel as though that so many of the conversations that I've had with different veterans was in that transition.
Yeah.
And really trying to find where their role, where their place was. And they were also a lot really used to structure, having a formula, so to speak, on what to do and when to do it. And they didn't find that when they transitioned out.
So what I found is, depending where you go, I'm with a very large corporation. There is bureaucracy, there is hierarchy, which, although different, felt comfortable, right? I understand there's a VP and a senior vice president, and we have organizations, and here's how you route messages, and there was process. Okay, I can deal with that. Smaller businesses much more flexible, and sometimes that freedom and flexibility, right, not understanding the rules of the game, or just the fact that they're different, takes a little bit of time to transition. But again, that's where I go back to you'll see a lot of veterans when they get out will sometimes do 2 to 3 different jobs before they sort of settle into a groove, because they have to try it out to figure out what they want. And again, that's the training, and experience side of the houses. We have programs like SkillBridge that let you go work in a company while you're still on active duty, or your last days, the last few months before you retire, to allow you to get some experience and sort of just try it out to get a little opportunity before you actually decide to take a job. It's all about looking in the mirror, knowing who you are, and then from there using that to sort of steer as your moral compass on where you want to go and what you want to do.
Yeah. That's helpful. I mean, we've talked about training, we've talked about transition. What did you find is the biggest distinction between being in the military and that training, that structure, that hierarchy, and what really makes a leader outside in the veteran world, in the civilian world? What is it that you found really makes an effective leader in the civilian world that may differ a little bit different from the military world?
So in the civilian,
same.
No, I think the skill sets were the same as how it manifests itself. Military leaders have a lot more responsibility to the whole person, right? I mean, everything from there's legal distinctions with the Uniform Code of Military Justice, and worrying about their families and their readiness and deployability and their training profiles. I don't see that as much. Like, those things don't exist on the civilian side. But a good leader, right, exceptional leader, is still trying to inspire their team, trying to remove the obstacles, clarity of the objectives. So where I've seen in industry, just these great leaders come out and they sit there, and I mean, everything from you walk out just going, yeah, let's go do that. But I knew exactly what they needed and what they wanted. I knew why we were doing it. I was inspired based on the fact that I knew my role and how I was contributing to the larger part of that mission, for winning or for producing, for our customers. And to me, that was inspiring. So you see the same sort of skill sets. They just play out a little bit different in the level of responsibility. Good leaders are good leaders. And I mean, to your bones, you can tell.
Yeah. Yeah. Even when someone has maybe not transitioned as well, or maybe they went through a period of time when they were just challenged, maybe, and maybe they weren't in the military, but they transitioned from being an athlete or transitioned from being in one field of business and profession to another. What do you think that person should do to help them with a transition and the psyche within?
Yeah. Change is a constant. It's the only constant, right? So as you get put into these scenarios, these situations, you have to be open and willing to accept different isn't wrong, right? And adapt to those new conditions. And then be willing to learn, be willing to take advice, be willing to seek advice and mentorship, and ask the questions to become successful. You mentioned athletes, right? High-performing athletes, high-performing teams transitioning somewhere else, especially if they're not high-performing, can be incredibly stressful, right? But then it's how do you do informal leadership that help inspire the team, be a good follower, and making sure you're doing things, looking for ways to improve or to embrace technological changes.
How do you do that without losing your confidence?
Because it's not a direct reflection on you when the team is struggling, right? Or when you get into a new job because you are an expert at something, right? You were good at something previously. Now it's a matter of saying, how do you rise that to that level of success again in a new field? It's a challenge, but you also have to realize that it's not a bad thing to learn new things.
Yeah.
And just because you haven't done it before doesn't mean you can't do it in the future. I tell my son this all the time, right? Just because you haven't done it doesn't mean you can't.
Yeah.
Just means we haven't learned how to do it yet. Let's take the time and invest and learn. And one day you'll look back and be great at it and go, oh, I got this.
How do you build a confidence within those others to let them know that you are up for the task, even though you may be, challenged or struggling in some capacity?
Attitude goes a long way.
Yeah.
Right? Attitude goes a long way. I will take somebody with a good attitude that I see trying over somebody who doesn't have those things, right? Any day of the week. Because again, it gets back to that, like I told you, the individual who didn't make a decision versus who I made the wrong decision. If I've got a good attitude and I've got somebody trying, I can teach them how to do the right things, or I can get them up to speed. And part of the exceptional inspired leaders are, you have to go communicate that to your people that we know you're going to get there. Like, we're excited, and, here are the programs that we can help. So it's preparedness meeting opportunity. And, that's what sort of is going to push people in the right direction.
Yeah. And maybe if those people aren't, then maybe you're not in the right environment.
So there's also you have to be true to people, and tell them, honestly, when this isn't for you. So I've had to do that both in the industry side, but then when I was doing things on the military side, hey, flying is not for you. And you wash somebody out of a program, it's their heart's desire that they were going to fly airplanes. But there was that moment you have to sort of be, look in the mirror and say to yourself, if I let this person achieve their goal, their dream, right, I'm putting them in jeopardy of killing themselves or killing a friend of mine or someone I know, because this is not their calling, right? And they can go off and do great things, just not this thing. Lots of kids grow up, want to be NFL players. It's not for everybody, right? I mean, there's genetics, there's attitude, there's performance, there's all these things that go into that. And not everybody achieves that. It's okay to tell somebody you reached your level, like you're not going to that next level. Let's think about doing something else. You're going to be a great computer programmer. You're going to do amazing things. That doesn't mean that you're a horrible person because you didn't do one thing. Just we have to find that thing that you're exceptional at.
Looking at the future, what is decision advantage and why does it matter?
So I'm in an organization right now within Leidos called Decision Advantage Solutions. And the way we look at it is, in today's modern world, there's so much significant information out there that there is a little bit of decision paralysis waiting to have enough information or to get perfect information. And the idea right now is in a complex modern sort of conflict fight in the world today, it's really about how do you make your adversaries react to you instead of reacting to them. And we like to think of it sort of, when you're thinking about air-to-air combat, we always use our hands when we talk, and the idea is they're turning battles, right? So it's who can turn inside the other person, and if they can turn inside of them, they now are dictating where the fight goes. So when you think of information, we do a thing called the OODL, the Observe, Orient, Decide, Act sort of process. And you want to observe and orient what's going on in the world, to think about it, make a decision, and then do something. How do I get that information quickly? How do I bring it in from all the right sources to the point where an individual can then make a decision on it? So the technology we're using today, if I could bring in these different data sources, have something like a large language model or an AI agent actually processing some of that to present to the individual making a decision, better information faster. The ability to make that decision makes anybody who is our adversary, who is presenting that problem set, they're forced now to react to me because I'm acting quicker than they can actually respond. And so for our national leaders, when you think about this modern world, whether it's business, whether it's military, whether it's economics, the ability for us to actually see the trends, make decisions on it, and then take action quicker, right? Informed action quicker is forcing everybody else then to respond to the way we're doing things. And so the technology is acting as a tool to allow us to do that. It's the way of the future, but it's for me, that's what's very exciting is how do we do it where people can make better decisions faster?
Oh my gosh, super powerful, because how do you make better decisions faster? And is that by training? Is that by readiness? Is that by being able to have critical thinking faster, to be able to pivot quicker? I mean, what is that? What is that formula, so to speak?
Well, so you teach critical thinking. Yeah. Right. You work with people to be critical thinkers. But what we found is you can get decision paralysis based on the fact that you're overloaded with too much information. You don't have the ability to mentally process everything that's coming at you. And so you may act on the first piece of information I got to make a decision. What you want to do is you want to be able to take in enough information, not everything, but enough that you're making informed decisions and then able to go forward. So the readiness aspect of things is the ability to process all this information, and having the ability to practice allows you then to, in complex situations, respond quicker because you've done it before. So that goes back to the way we do red flag exercises or anything else. It's how do you present opportunities to get experience before it's real? It's no different than a sports team. You sweat and practice so you don't lead on the field, right? That's what drives success. So if I can create opportunities and tools that allow you to take in better information, allow you to make decisions faster, and have trust that you're making better decisions, that sets you up for success and everything else.
What excites you most about the future and about what you have understood about, simulation training, the military, but what you see happening at Leidos and with other organizations and what's happening in the world?
I'll take it a little bit of a different spin. What concerns me and what excites me is the fact that new technologies are coming, and they're coming fast, which offer great capabilities. Not everything is necessarily a bright, shiny object we should go after. But there are a lot of great technologies. For me, the things I really find exciting are the agentic AI capabilities that I'm seeing developed today, and quantum computing. The fact that we'll be able to process that much more information rapidly.
Like, how does that work, though? Can you explain?
Yeah. But those capabilities together as tools to help us make better decisions, I think is fantastic. What I see and what concerns me is the fact that we sometimes don't want to deviate from what we've always done. My wife's a physical therapist. She taught me a really cool word, brachiate. The act of brachiation is a primate swinging from vine to vine or bar to bar. Think Tarzan swinging on a vine, or monkey bars. If you reach for the future and that new technology, but you don't let go of the past, right? You stop movement. You literally are stuck. And so the whole idea is, if you're reaching for that future, you have to be willing to divest of old thought processes or old technology to allow you to continue moving on. At one point, this country made magnificent steam engines. We just don't do it anymore because there are better ways of doing things. The same thing has to happen now with the technology. And the government, in my opinion, is somewhat reluctant. There's a sunk cost bias to, we've spent significant amount of money on something, I don't want to get rid of it. I tend to be a heretic. I'm the guy who believes in revolution over evolution. where I don't want to make incremental small changes over time, but rather let's jump to the future and figure out how we can take advantage of that versus slowly kind of working our way there. So I'm excited, but slightly concerned at the same time.
Wow. Yeah. I love the steam engine analogy. That's perfect because, that's, you have to completely pivot rather than just continue to evolve and invest in what we have. So we talk to peak performers, athletes, leaders, what they do to overcome obstacles when they arise. What would you advise individuals do when obstacles do arise?
So I think good leaders are always going to have to take a look at the situation, but know their team, inspire their team, realize that change is inevitable. So don't be stressed by change. Clear the obstacles and inspire your folks. And then sometimes have a little humility and the ability to step back and let them perform without the need to sort of micromanage and get in there, especially in challenging situations. If you have spent the time with your people ahead of time and you know them and you've given them clear guidance and sort of that ability to move forward, let them execute, right? You'll be impressed at their ingenuity to actually get things accomplished. Especially if you inspire and give them that trust to go forward. People will bleed out of their eyeballs to make sure that they don't let you down.
The other question is, how do you transition from being a doer to a leader?
I think that if you're a good follower, you're a good doer, and you get put in those situations, become the person that you wanted to leave you, and make sure that you're a servant leader and that you're looking out for your team will take care of the mission. You look out for the team, clear the obstacles, make sure that they have everything they need to be successful, and let them actually go and actually achieve whatever desired result you have. It's difficult to go from being the person who did it because you were good at it, most likely if you got promoted up. But you also know that you didn't want somebody actually going in there and getting in your chili. And it's difficult sometimes, but, sitting on your hands and saying, you got this is sometimes much more effective, and they'll do better if you train them properly than you probably ever did.
This is great. This has been a great conversation. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
No, it was really fun having the conversation. Thanks for working.
Thank you.